I was 78 the morning I realized my own son had taken $92,400 from me, and I remember the exact way the numbers looked on the screen, like they were sneering at me. It was January 12th, 2023, a Thursday, a little after 6:40 a.m. The sun wasn't even up yet over Dayton, Ohio. I was sitting at my kitchen table in my old flannel robe, the one my late wife bought me from J.C. Penney back in '09, and the house was still cold enough that I could see my breath when I huffed out a sigh. The coffee hadn't even finished dripping, and already the day had broken me in half. You're probably thinking an old man like me must have imagined things, or maybe typed a password wrong or hit the wrong account. That's what folks assume about men my age. But I didn't misread a thing. My hands were shaking, sure, but my eyes were fine. I kept blinking, waiting for the numbers to change back to what they were supposed to be. They didn't. What hit me wasn't the missing money at first. It was the feeling that I'd just been slapped across the face by the one person left in the world I still trusted. My son Daniel, my only kid, my blood. And the transaction history, neat as the lines on a ledger, showed transfers I never approved, never saw, never imagined he'd dare pull. 48,000 in October, another 30 in November. 14,400 right after New Year. Like a final little nibble before he figured the old man wouldn't notice. I still remember muttering, "No, Danny wouldn't do this," to the empty kitchen. Saying it out loud didn't make it any truer. The coffee maker clicked, and that tiny sound somehow made everything feel real. I sat there gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles went white. My breath came tight and uneven, like I'd run up the basement stairs too fast. I could smell the burnt coffee grounds, should have cleaned the machine last weekend, and I could feel the cold from the window draft creeping up my pajama leg. Funny how you remember the dumbest details in the worst moments. I picked up the phone. I don't know what I planned to say. Maybe I thought he'd answer and tell me it was some banking glitch. Maybe I hoped for a crack in his voice, some sign he was scared or guilty or still my boy underneath everything. But when he answered, he sounded calm, too calm. "What's up, Dad?" he said, like it was any other morning. "Danny, did you take money from my retirement account?" My voice cracked on the word retirement, which embarrassed me for some reason. There was a long pause. I could hear traffic through his Bluetooth, that constant hiss of morning commuters on I-75. Then he said, "Dad, we talked about this. You said I could use some of it to help with the house." "I said I'd help with repairs," I snapped back. "Not $92,000 worth. Jesus, Danny." I could feel my heart thudding all the way up my neck. He sighed, one of those long, patient sighs adult children use when they think their parents are being difficult. "Dad, you're not remembering right. You signed off on it." "I sure as hell did not." "Well, maybe you forgot." That sentence hit harder than any punch I took in basic training back in '64. Maybe you forgot. That's the little seed they plant when they start treating you like you're fading away. The implication was louder than the words. "Maybe you're slipping, old man." "I didn't forget," I told him, and the steadiness in my voice surprised us both. He suddenly got flustered. "Look, Dad, I'm in traffic. We'll talk later." "Daniel." I said his full name like I used to when he was 6 and stole baseball cards from the grocery store. "The bank's sending me paperwork." He hung up. Not a goodbye, not a promise to explain, just dead air. That was the moment something in me shifted. Not broke, no, the breaking had already happened the second I saw the numbers. What moved in me then was different, a tightening, a hardening. My father used to call it the grip. Said every man has a point in his life when he either curls inward and lets the world step on him, or he plants his feet and refuses to go down. I hadn't felt that grip in decades, but it came back to me like muscle memory. I sat there a while longer, listening to the refrigerator hum and the coffee sizzle on the burner. Every little sound felt sharp. The house had always been too quiet since Linda passed in 2018. But that morning the quiet felt accusatory, like it was asking me, what I planned to do now that my own son had gutted me financially. I didn't cry, not then. What I felt wasn't sadness. It was a kind of cold fury that made my hands steady, not shaky. And underneath that fury there was something else too. Shame. A deep, rotten shame that I had raised a man capable of this. When I finally stood up from the table, my knees popped like dry twigs, but I didn't care. I opened the drawer where I kept my old paperwork, wills, statements, power of attorney forms from when Daniel helped after my surgery. I wasn't sure what I was looking for yet, but I knew I needed to understand how deep this betrayal went. As I pulled out the manila folder, a thought slid into my mind, quiet but sharp as a razor. He thinks I'm too old to fight back. And right then, I made my first promise, to myself, to whatever dignity I had left, maybe even to Linda's memory. I whispered it out loud. Danny, you have no idea who you're dealing with. This was the beginning, the before of the storm. The moment the old man everyone underestimated finally decided to stand up. You know, before all this ugliness with Danny, my life was quieter than most men my age get to enjoy. Not perfect. No, nothing's perfect once you bury the woman you built your life with, but steady, predictable. My days had a rhythm to them, the kind of rhythm you only get after decades of grinding, raising a kid, paying off a mortgage, and trying to do right by the people God put in your path. Back before the betrayal, my mornings started slow. I'd wake around 6:15, joints crackling like old radio static. I'd sit on the edge of the bed a moment, palms on my thighs, breathing through that deep ache that settles into a man's bones once he crosses 70. My bedroom window faces east, so the sunlight would creep over the maple trees in my backyard and lay across the floorboards like a long, warm ribbon. Some mornings I'd swear I could hear Linda humming in the kitchen, even though she's been gone 6 years. That's how memory works. It ambushes you with kindness sometimes, just to make the losses feel sharper. Most days I'd shuffle into the kitchen, pour myself a cup from the old Mr. Coffee machine, and sit by the window watching the neighborhood wake up. Dayton's not the flashiest place in America, but it's home. Weathered porches, flagpoles with fading stripes, neighbors who still wave even if they can't remember your name. There's comfort in that kind of place. You know where you stand. My son used to be part of that comfort. Danny was a good kid once. Not perfect, but good. He loved little league, hated vegetables, and talked back just enough to make me worry, but not enough to make me take off my belt. Linda used to say, "He's got your stubborn streak," and maybe that was true. I liked thinking he got something decent from me. When he was a teenager, he'd come home smelling like motor oil from the auto shop he worked at after school. I'd lean on the doorway and watch him wipe grease off his hands with an old rag, shaking his head at cars that were older than he was. "Some folks don't know how to take care of what matters," he'd say, like a little philosopher. Funny how a kid can sound wise before the world gets its claws in him. But somewhere along the line, maybe in his 20s, maybe earlier, the edges of him changed. He started chasing things he couldn't quite catch. Nicer apartments, fancy gadgets, weekend trips he couldn't afford. Always investments, always opportunities, always something just out of reach. I'd offer help when I could, never too much, just enough to keep him steady. A used car, a loan for a security deposit, groceries when times got tight. He always said thank you. He always promised he'd pay me back. He never did. But I never held it against him. A father's job is to give what he can, even when it's not returned. At least, that's what I believed back then. After Linda died, things got quieter between us. He called less, visited even less than that. Once he drove me to my follow-up appointment after I had a stent put in. This was spring of 2020, and I remember how he kept checking his phone in the waiting room, scrolling, tapping, scrolling. I asked him if everything was okay. "Yeah, Dad just work stuff," he said, tucking the phone into his pocket. But he didn't look at me when he said it. I should have asked more questions. I should have taken note of how anxious he was about money even then. How jumpy he got when I mentioned my retirement fund. How he joked, half-joked, about me being set for life while he was barely treading water. I just figured he was stressed. That's what fathers do. We minimize, we forgive, we hope our kids grow out of their rough patches. I didn't see the slope he was slipping down until it was too late. The thing you have to understand is that I trusted him. Not blindly, but honestly. I let him help after my knee replacement in 2021. He drove me to appointments, picked up prescriptions, even organized some of my paperwork because bending over made my leg throb. One afternoon, he asked if he could set up online access to help pay my utility bills faster. "You don't have to do that," I told him. "I manage fine." "I know, Dad," he said. "It's just easier for me to help if I can see everything in one place." I remember looking at him, seeing tired eyes, stubble on his jaw, and thinking maybe he really was trying. Maybe this was the grown-up version of the boy I raised. So I handed him the folder, the bank documents, the login info written on a yellow sticky note. I didn't think twice, I didn't think once, I just trusted him. He sat at my kitchen table with his laptop open, tapping away. "I'll make this simpler for you," he said. "You shouldn't be stressing about bills at your age." I smiled, I actually smiled. "Thank you, son." He didn't look up, but he said, "Of course, Dad." That moment feels like a punch to the gut now. If I had known he was laying the groundwork for what he'd take from me, God, I wouldn't have let him near that folder. The signs came later, little things I brushed aside. He'd stop by less often but ask more questions about my accounts. He'd mention opportunities, low risk, high reward nonsense he read about online. Once he joked that if I died, at least he'd know where all my paperwork was. I laughed at the time. I actually laughed. And now, sitting here telling you this, I can still hear that laugh echoing through the kitchen like a ghost of a man too trusting for his own good. Before all this, Danny wasn't a villain in my eyes. He was my boy, my only family. I didn't see the storm coming. I didn't see how far he'd drifted from the kid who loved motor oil and simple things. I didn't see the man he'd become, the man who'd look at his father's life savings like it was a lifeline for his own drowning ambitions. But I was about to see everything, every crack, every lie, every betrayal I'd missed or forgiven along the way. And once you see the truth like that, clear as daylight through an unwashed window, there's no unseeing it. Everything changed after I opened that folder again. Everything. You know, when I look back at the whole mess, the first real crack didn't happen on the morning I saw the missing money. No, that was the explosion, the collapse. The crack came months earlier, quiet and thin, like the first line in a windshield after a pebble hits it on the highway. You don't notice it at first. You convince yourself it's nothing, but every mile makes it wider. For me, that pebble came one afternoon in August of 2022. Hot day. The kind where the Ohio humidity sits on your shoulders like a wet coat. I'd spent the morning trimming back the maple branches that were brushing against the roofline, and by noon my shirt was plastered to my back. I stepped inside, poured myself a glass of lemonade, and noticed a letter from Columbia Federal sitting in the mail pile. The envelope felt thicker than usual. I remember frowning at that. Bank mail is usually just monthly statements or the same pointless credit card offers I always toss out. I slid it open and pulled out 3 sheets. 2 were routine, but the third, well, that's the moment the crack appeared, even though I didn't see the whole shape yet. It was a notice confirming a change in my beneficiary information. Not the main account, but one of my side savings. An old account I'd started in the late 90s to put away a few dollars each month for emergencies. I hardly touched it except for the roof replacement back in 14. The notice said, "Beneficiary updated, Daniel W. Hargrove." Now Danny was already my beneficiary for most things. That wasn't the issue. What tripped my gut was that the letter said the change had been submitted online. I'd never updated anything online. Hell, I struggled just checking my email half the time. I stood there at the counter with the paper trembling a little in my hand. Not from fear, Just age, I guess. Or maybe something deeper. I told myself it must have been part of the updates he did when he helped set up my online banking the year before. Maybe the system spit out an old notification. Computers do strange things sometimes. Still, something felt off. I called Danny later that evening. He answered on the second ring, but his voice had that rushed quality he gets when he's multitasking. "Hey Dad, everything okay?" "I got a letter from the bank today," I said. "Something about updating the beneficiary. Did you do that?" There was a pause, short but not short enough. "Oh yeah. Yeah, that was from when we updated your info last year. Just an old notice, I think." "You sure?" I asked. "Positive, Dad," he replied, and he forced a chuckle, the kind people use when they want to glide past a topic. "Don't worry about that stuff. The bank systems are weird." "All right," I said, but the words sat in my mouth like dry bread. After we hung up, I stood at the sink staring out the window at the yard. The cicadas were screaming in the trees, louder than usual. My lemonade had watered down into a pale, tasteless thing, and I dumped it down the drain. I kept thinking about that pause, that tiny hesitation. The moment his breath stopped, almost like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. But then I shook my head and told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself not to let my age make me paranoid. That's the trick life plays on older folks. You start questioning your own instincts just because the calendar says you're not as sharp as you used to be. Looking back now, I wasn't imagining a damn thing. The next crack came about a month later in September. I'd gone to the VA clinic for my blood pressure check. Nothing serious, just routine. And on the drive home, I decided to treat myself to lunch at Frisch's Big Boy. My doctor always told me to cut down on fried food, but hell, a man's gotta live a little. I ordered a patty melt and fries, and while I waited, I pulled out the receipt for my copy. The number looked wrong, higher than usual, $20 more. I checked my notes. I keep a little notebook in my shirt pocket with dates, payments, prescriptions. My handwriting's not pretty, but it keeps me grounded. The copay last visit was $60. This one was $80. That bothered me. Not the money, but the inconsistency. So after lunch, I stopped by the clinic window and asked the receptionist about it. Young woman, friendly, glasses too big for her face. She typed my name. "Mr. Hargrove, it looks like your insurance information was updated earlier this year." "Updated by who?" It says here the changes were submitted by your authorized representative." My stomach tightened. What representative? She squinted at the screen. "Someone named Daniel." I felt a strange pinch in the center of my chest, not a health kind of pinch, but a betrayal kind. Still, I kept my voice steady. "What exactly did he update?" "Looks like your billing preferences and correspondence permissions." Correspondence permissions. That meant letters, emails, possibly things I should have been seeing but wasn't. When I got home, I called Danny again. "Hey," he said, sounding distracted. "Everything all right?" "I went to the VA today," I said. "They told me you updated my insurance information." "Yeah," he said quickly, too quickly. "You asked me to last year, remember, after your knee surgery. You wanted me to handle the paperwork." "No," I said quietly. "I don't remember that." He laughed, but it didn't sound natural, more like a cover. "Dad, your memory isn't what it used to be. No offense." Something inside me bristled at that, like a dog raising its hackles. "I remember enough," I said. "I remember I didn't ask you to change how my mail is handled." "Dad," he said, and his tone softened into condescension, "you're overthinking this. I'm just trying to help." "I didn't ask for that kind of help." He exhaled sharply. "Do you want me to stop assisting with your accounts?" The way he said it, not worried, not apologetic, more like a challenge, a warning even. I could almost picture him leaning back in his chair, eyes narrowed, waiting for me to back down. I swallowed. "Let's just talk about it later." "Yeah," he said, "later." And then he hung up again. You'd think that would have been enough for me to slam on the brakes, to go digging through every account and every login. But this is the part that hurts to admit. I didn't want to believe my son was capable of taking advantage of me. When you're a father, you build a whole damn world around the belief that your kid is at least better than the worst possibility. You ignore the little signs. You swallow the doubts. You minimize the inconsistencies. That was my mistake. Because the crack widened again a week later, and this time I couldn't pretend it wasn't there. It was a phone call from Columbia Federal's fraud department. And the man on the other end said a sentence that froze my blood colder than any winter storm we ever had in Ohio. Mr. Hargrove, we have a concern about recent transfers made from your account. That was the moment the windshield didn't just crack, it spiderwebbed. And the whole truth was about to hit me, whether I was ready or not. The man from Columbia Federal introduced himself as Jeffrey Price, a fraud investigator. Calm voice, Midwestern accent, the kind of tone that's supposed to reassure you. But the moment he said my name in that steady, measured way, I knew I was in trouble, real trouble. Mr. Hargrove, he said, I'm calling regarding several irregular transfers from your savings and retirement accounts. We need to verify a few details with you. My mouth went dry. What kind of transfers? He hesitated, just a breath, but enough. Before I go into specifics, can you confirm whether you authorized multiple online transfers between October 3rd and January 5th? I could hear something behind his voice, caution, maybe even suspicion, or maybe concern. At my age, people often talk to you like you're fragile glass. I didn't authorize any transfers, I said. None. There was a silence on the line, thicker than the Dayton humidity in July. Finally, he said, Mr. Hargrove, that's what we feared. My fingers tightened around the receiver. I could feel my pulse in my wrist, heavy and slow, like my heart was thinking twice with every beat. What happened? I asked, though I already knew. Not the details, but the feeling, the dread, the truth pressing its way up my throat. He cleared his throat. On October 3rd, a transfer of $48,000 was initiated from your retirement account into a checking account under the name Daniel W. Hargrove. My son's full name, my own last name. Hearing it like that, cold, official, documented, was like being kicked in the ribs. I swallowed. Go on. On November 17th, he continued, there was a second transfer of $30,000, and on January 5th, a final transfer of $14,400. All three were approved through online banking access connected to your profile. My profile, I whispered. Yes, sir. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard the wood dug into my palm. I didn't approve any of those. I didn't even know my account could transfer money online. Then it appears someone with access to your login credentials may have taken control of the account. There it was, clean, clinical, devastating. My knees buckled, not enough to fall, but enough that I had to lean against the counter. I stared at the microwave display, watching the numbers blink to 4:43 p.m. like they were mocking me. Mr. Hargrove, he continued gently, do you know anyone who may have had access to your banking information? I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know. Because the truth hurt so much, it was hard to breathe. Instead, I asked, can you tell me where the money went? He sighed. It was deposited into an account belonging to your son. We've verified that. I closed my eyes. The darkness behind my eyelids felt safer than the world outside them. My son, my only son, the boy I taught how to change oil, the boy I hugged when he struck out in Little League, the boy who sat next to me at his mother's funeral trying not to cry. Mr. Price, I said, my voice thin, what can be done? Well, sir, we'll initiate a fraud investigation, but because the account belongs to a family member and the transfers were authenticated with valid credentials, the case becomes complex. Meaning, I pressed. Meaning it may be difficult to prove unauthorized access unless we can establish you were not the one who initiated or approved these transfers. I let out a bitter laugh. I don't even know how to transfer $10, let alone 70 or 80,000. I understand, sir, he said softly, but the system has recorded the transfers as being authorized by your device. My device. A cold wave rolled through my gut. That was the moment the memory hit me. Danny sitting at my kitchen table the year before, my old laptop open, his fingers flying across the keys as he said, "I'll make this simpler for you, Dad." He didn't just set up bill pay. He took everything he needed. Mr. Price cleared his throat. "It might help if you come into the branch. Bring any documentation you have. We'll do everything we can." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I'll come tomorrow." After I hung up, the silence in the house felt alive, pressing in, accusing, echoing. I walked to the kitchen table and sat down hard, elbows on my knees, head in my hands. My breath came tight, shaky. I wasn't crying, not yet, but something close was pressing at the edges. That was when I saw the photo frame on the shelf across from me. Danny at age 10, grinning wide, missing his 2 front teeth, holding up a lopsided birdhouse we built together in the garage. His eyes were bright, hopeful, full of the kind of innocence only kids can hold. And it hit me all at once. He didn't just take my money. He took the man I thought he was. That realization, that's what shattered me. My phone buzzed then, loud in the quiet room, and I nearly jumped. It was Danny. His name lit up the screen, familiar and foreign all at once. I answered, "Yeah." "Dad," he said, sounding irritated, "why did the bank call me asking about a fraud alert? They said you reported unauthorized activity." My heart thudded painfully. "I didn't report anything yet," I said. "They called me." "Well, you must have said something wrong," he snapped. "They're acting like I stole from you." "Did you?" I asked quietly. There was a pause, a long, dangerous pause. "Dad," he said finally, "you're confused. You gave me permission months ago. We talked about this." "No," I said, "we didn't." His tone shifted, harder now. "Maybe you forgot." I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't forget. He exhaled sharply, like I was inconveniencing him. "Look, this is getting blown out of proportion. Just tell the bank everything is fine." "Everything is not fine." "Dad," he said coldly, "don't make this harder than it needs to be." Something inside me cracked again, this time not from hurt, but from anger. Quiet, controlled, deadly anger I didn't know I had left in me. "Danny," I said, my voice low, "you took $92,400 from me." He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He just said, "I needed it." I closed my eyes. "You stole from your father." "Stop being dramatic," he muttered. "It's family money." "No," I said, and my whole body went still. It was my life savings. He didn't answer. And then he hung up. Just like that. No explanation, no remorse. Just a dead line. That was the moment the shattering was complete. The moment the father in me broke and the man in me woke up. Because if Danny thought I was too old, too weak, too slow to fight back, he was about to learn who raised him. The night after Danny hung up on me, the house felt like it was shrinking in on itself. Every room seemed smaller, shadows stretching long across the walls like they were leaning in to listen to my thoughts. I sat in my recliner until almost midnight, TV flickering with some rerun sitcom laugh track I wasn't really hearing. My mind was busy replaying every moment I'd ever had with my boy, every birthday, every Christmas, every scraped knee I patched up. It all felt like it was slipping through my fingers like dust. Around 12:30 a.m. I finally shut the TV off. The silence rushed in so fast it almost made me dizzy. I stood up and shuffled toward the bedroom, but halfway down the hall I stopped. My knees locked up, and not from arthritis. From the weight of what had hit me earlier, I wasn't sure I could trust my own judgment anymore. That's a dangerous thought for a man my age, the kind that can unravel your whole sense of self. I whispered to nobody, what if he's right? What if I am forgetting things? The question hung there in the dark like a ghost. I hated that it even crossed my mind. I hated that Danny, my own son, had planted that seed. Maybe you forgot. Those words were poison. They linger, they rot, they spread. I went to bed, but sleep didn't come. I laid there on my back, staring at the ceiling with the faint orange glow of the streetlight bleeding through the blinds. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the numbers from my account. $48,000, $30,000, $14,400. My chest tightened up, and for a second I thought I was having a heart attack. Turned out it was just grief, with a little bit of rage twisting under it. Around 4:12 a.m., I remember because I looked at the clock. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen for water. The floor was cold as hell on my bare feet, and I leaned on the counter just to steady myself. My reflection in the window looked older than I felt, or maybe I felt older than I looked. Hard to say anymore. I muttered to that reflection, what did I ever do to deserve this? And that's when the worst thought hit me. What if this was it? What if the rest of my life was just going downhill from here? A slow slide into Bane, a burden, an easy mark. A forgotten old man with a wiped-out savings and a son who saw him as a wallet instead of a father. I don't mind telling you, that thought broke me a little. The next morning I drove to Columbia Federal like Mr. Price asked, but I damn near didn't make it. My hands shook on the wheel. My right knee seized up at a stoplight. A guy behind me honked and yelled out his window, "Move it, old man." I rolled up my window even though it was January and freezing. Didn't need anyone seeing my eyes watering. When I walked into the bank, every fluorescent light felt too bright, like the world was examining me under a microscope. Mr. Price came out from a side door, a tall, thin man in his 50s with gray hair buzzed close to his head. He shook my hand, firm grip, steady eyes. The kind of handshake a drowning man clings to. He led me into a small office with beige walls and a desk that looked like it hadn't moved since the 90s. He closed the door gently and sat down across from me. "Mr. Hargrove," he said, "I want to start by telling you you're not alone. This happens more often than people think." His voice was kind, but those words cut deep. Not alone. That meant other people, other parents, had children who'd done something like this. That gave me no comfort. "I need you to look at this," he said, sliding a printed packet toward me. There were screenshots from my online banking profile, security settings, device logins, timestamps, and each one had something in common. Every login, every transfer, every change came from a device with my son's IP address. "Mr. Price," I whispered, "can this be wrong?" He shook his head. "No, sir." I stared down at the paper and something inside me just collapsed. Not physically, but the spirit part of me. The part that always believed Danny would come through. The part that still held onto hope. "Why would he do this?" I said, my voice barely above a breath. Mr. Price didn't answer. Maybe he couldn't, maybe nobody could. When I left the bank, I sat in my car for a full 15 minutes before I could even turn the ignition. My chest felt hollow, heavy. My hands kept going numb like my nerves were short-circuiting. For a second, I thought about driving straight to Danny's place, banging on his door, demanding he look me in the eye and tell me why. But another voice, Linda's voice, whispered in my mind, "Not yet." She always had that calm sense about her. Always kept me from jumping headfirst into things. I drove home instead. When I walked into my house, I saw something that finally cracked me the rest of the way open. A framed photo on the entryway table, Linda and me at our 40th anniversary barbecue. Danny standing behind us with his arms over our shoulders. The smile on his face was wide, genuine, warm. For a moment I let myself feel the warmth of that memory. But then I remembered the voice on the phone, cold and dismissive. Stop being dramatic, it's family money. I took the frame off the table and held it so tight my knuckles went white. I don't know if I wanted to cry or throw the damn thing. In the end, I did neither. I set it face down. That was the final descent, the lowest point, because that's when I realized something I didn't want to believe. My son didn't just steal my money. He expected to get away with it. He expected me to roll over, to be confused, to be helpless. And maybe I was right then in that moment. But grief has a strange way of fermenting into something stronger, something sharper. That night I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling again. But this time I wasn't thinking about losing everything. I was thinking about how to get it back. And more importantly, how to make Danny regret ever underestimating me. The morning after that sleepless night, I woke up with a strange kind of clarity, like the fog in my mind had finally lifted. Not all the way, but enough that I could see the outline of what needed to be done. I've never been a dramatic man, never believed God sent signs or messages. But when I swung my legs off the bed and felt the floor under my feet, I swear there was something solid in me again. A backbone stiffening, a purpose forming. I shuffled into the kitchen, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat down at the table. The same table where Danny once did his homework. The same table where he set up my online banking, smiling like he was doing me the biggest favor. I stared at my laptop, that old clunky thing with the cracked corner and the missing N key, and I felt this surge of stubbornness. "All right," I muttered, "let's see what else you've been up to, Danny." I opened the laptop and logged in as best I could. Took me a few tries. I typed my password too slow, the system timed out. I cursed at the screen like it was alive. But on the fourth try, I got in. And once the account dashboard loaded, my pulse started thumping in my neck again. There were more things changed. Automatic notifications disabled. A forwarding email I didn't recognize. Security questions answered wrong, the wrong childhood pet, the wrong high school. Everything twisted just enough that I might doubt myself. I sat back, exhaled hard, and rubbed my temples. That was when a sound pulled me out of my thoughts, a soft knock on my front door. I wasn't expecting anybody. Folks in my neighborhood don't usually stop by unannounced unless something's wrong. I opened the door, and there stood Rosa Alvarez, the night shift nurse who lived 2 houses down. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, brown hair tied back in a braid. She used to check in on me after my knee replacement, always bringing Tupperware of puzzle or chicken stew when she made too much. "Mr. Hargrove," she said, "I saw your light on. You okay? You look pale." I started to lie, old habit, I guess, but something in her expression stopped me. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was that I had nobody else left to talk to. I stepped aside to let her in. She set her jacket on the back of a chair and asked, "What's going on?" And for the first time since the whole nightmare started, I told someone the truth. Everything, the transfers, the lies, the bank call, the way Danny spoke to me. I didn't even realize I was trembling until she put a hand on my arm and said, Hey, slow down, you don't have to rush." I nodded and took a shaky breath. When I finished, she leaned back in the chair, arms crossed, her face tight with anger, not at me, at the situation. "You know this happens a lot," she said quietly. "To people your age, families talking advantage. I see it at the nursing home all the time." "I'm not in a nursing home," I snapped, sharper than I meant to. "Not yet." She held up her hands. "I know, Mr. Hargrove, I didn't mean it like that. I've seen this. Sons, daughters, grandkids, they get access to accounts and then poof." She flicked her fingers. "Savings gone." My jaw clenched. What do people do about it? "Most don't know how to fight back." She paused, "but some do." I looked at her, really looked at her. "You know how to help someone like me?" She hesitated just long enough to make me curious. "I might," she said. "Depends how far you want to go." "How far?" I asked. "All the way." A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "All right then, First thing we do is document everything. Every change he made, every login, every phone call. You got notes?" "Always," I said, tapping the pocket notebook in my shirt. "Good. Now we need someone who can pull the digital footprints. A guy who knows how to dig." "I don't know anyone like that." "I do," she said. "My nephew Zach works in IT security for some insurance company. He's smart, and he owes me about 10 favors from when he was living with me." I wasn't convinced. "Can he really help?" She shrugged. "Let's find out." That afternoon, Rosa came back with Zach, a lanky kid in his late 20s, buzzed hair, glasses smudged with fingerprints, carrying a backpack stuffed with gadgets. He stepped into my kitchen like it was a crime scene. "What exactly did your son do?" he asked, already pulling out a laptop. I handed him the printouts Mr. Price gave me. His eyebrows shot up. "Damn," he muttered, "that's bold." "Bold?" I growled. "He stole $92,400 from me." Zach nodded, and he didn't even try to hide it well. That's the bold part. He cracked his knuckles and opened his laptop. "Okay, Mr. Hargrove, I'm gonna explain everything I do as I do it. We're gonna keep a clean record. You good with that?" I nodded. He plugged my old laptop into his, with some cable that looked like it belonged in a spaceship. Rosa stood behind him with her arms crossed while I sat across the table, feeling like a student in a class I never signed up for. Zach typed fast, too fast for me to keep up. Lines of text scrolled by like a foreign language. He muttered technical things under his breath. Endpoint, metadata, session logs, credential handshake. After 20 minutes, he sat back and whistled. "Your son changed your recovery email to one he controls. He disabled security alerts. He's been logging in from his apartment pretty regularly." And he paused, scrolling again. "He accessed your tax documents too." I stared at him. Why would he do that? Zach shrugged. "Usually means they're preparing to impersonate someone financially. Loans, credit lines, refunds. Hard to say yet." I felt my pulse in my jaw. So he hasn't just taken money. He might be talking my identity. "Could be," Zach said. "But the good news is he's sloppy, really sloppy." "Good news," I barked. "How the hell is that good?" "Because it means we can trace everything back to him. And if we gather enough evidence, he won't just have to return the money. He'll have legal consequences." Rosa put a hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone in this, Mr. Hargrove. We're gonna do this right." I swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. "You don't have to say anything," she said. "Just keep going, that's the hard part." For the first time since the nightmare began, the air in the room felt lighter. Not good, nothing about any of this felt good, but less suffocating. Because for the first time in weeks, I had something that mattered. A plan. Zach pulled out a portable hard drive. "I'm copying everything we need. When we're done, your son's not gonna know what hit him." I looked at the kid, then at Rosa, and something inside me, something I thought was long dead, started warming up again. Hope, quiet, fragile, but real. As Zach worked, Rosa leaned down beside me and whispered, "The turning point comes when you stop reacting and start building." "And what am I building?" I asked. "A case," she said, "and a damn good one." Zach clicked a few more keys and nodded. "Okay, we're ready for the next step." I looked from him to Rosa. "What's the next step?" Rosa smiled a little. "You start acting like the helpless old man he thinks you are." I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "So he keeps macking mistakes." I sat back in my chair, feeling something I hadn't felt since before Linda died, the slow, steady return of my strength. Danny had no idea what was coming. And that was just how I needed it. It's funny how, when you're deep in the middle of a mess like this, you forget that everything has a rhythm. The betrayals, the lies, the schemes, they all make noise, and eventually that noise drowns out the normal sounds of life. The morning birds, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, those things fade away, and all you hear is your own pulse hammering, the constant buzz of thoughts that won't let you go. But the key, Rosa said, was to make sure the noise worked in my favor. She said I had to be patient, let Danny think I was clueless, let him keep digging his own hole. It felt strange, holding my cards so close to my chest, especially after everything that had already happened. I was a man used to taking action, used to getting answers the moment I had questions. But Rosa was right. The moment I started reacting, the moment I showed Danny I knew what he'd done, he'd pull back. He'd hide. He'd get smarter. So I kept playing the fool. For the next few weeks, I pretended nothing had changed. I went through my usual routine. I spent my mornings in the kitchen, drinking coffee, reading the paper, staring at the mailbox with a dull, numb stare. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. I didn't even ask how he was doing. The hardest part was pretending I wasn't shaking with anger every time I thought about him, but I swallowed it down bit by bit. Rosa and Zach were working on the case behind the scenes. I didn't ask too many questions. They were setting up a digital trail, pulling every piece of information they could from Danny's devices, tracing back to every transaction, every login. They knew he was getting sloppy. The more I let him think he had the upper hand, the more mistakes he'd make. I'll admit it wasn't easy. There were days I wanted to show up at his apartment, slam my fist on his door, and demand he return what he took. But I held off. I waited. By the time I saw him again, it had been 3 weeks since the phone call. He showed up unannounced on a Thursday afternoon, early for him, and I could already feel the tension in the air. I knew something was off. He knocked on the door like he was walking into a stranger's house. That's when I knew. I opened the door and saw him standing there, hands in his pockets, the same tired look in his eyes. He hadn't even bothered to put on a smile. He was wearing a jacket too, like he was trying to look professional. But the man I once knew was barely behind the surface anymore. "Hey, Dad," he said, voice flat. "Got a minute?" I stepped aside and let him in, but I didn't make it easy. I didn't offer him a seat. I didn't ask how he was. I just let the silence stretch between us. It wasn't a comfortable silence either. It was thick, like we were both waiting for the other to make the first move. He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, I know things have been weird lately." "Weird?" I said, cocking an eyebrow. "You mean you stole from me?" He froze, then forced a laugh. "Come on, Dad, let's not do this here." "Oh, I think it's past time for not doing this, don't you?" I said, staring at him, waiting for his reaction. He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" I asked, stepping closer, my voice dropping lower. "Because it's pretty damn hard to overreact when you're staring at the truth. You took money from me, Danny. You took my savings. You used my trust to line your pockets, and you've been playing me like a fool." His face flushed. I could see the guilt and frustration flicker in his eyes for just a moment before he wiped it away, trying to cover it with a scowl. "I told you, Dad, I'm helping you. You don't understand how much you need me." I stepped back, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "I don't need you, Danny. I don't need someone who will steal from me, lie to me, and try to cover it all up with excuses. If you were really helping me, you'd be honest. You wouldn't take what's mine and pretend like you're doing me a favor." He shifted his weight again, eyes darting toward the door like he was considering leaving. I let the silence hang in the air, just long enough to make him uncomfortable. "Do you even know what you've done?" I asked. "You've violated everything, every ounce of trust I had in you. You've stolen from me and you've made it personal. What you don't understand is that I'm not the fool you think I am. I'm not the weak old man you've been treating me like." He opened his mouth, probably to protest, but I didn't give him the chance. "I'm giving you one last chance," I said, my voice low and steady. "Return what you took, all of it, every damn cent, and we'll figure out how to move forward. But if you think you're getting away with this, think again." He swallowed, his face pale, but his eyes never left mine. "You're being unreasonable." I stepped closer, my presence filling the space between us. "I've been patient with you, Danny, too patient, but I've had enough. You've got until the end of the month to make things right. If you don't, I'll take the next step." He blinked, his eyes narrowing. "What next step?" "The one you won't see coming," I said, my voice sharp. "You'll wish you had never done this, but if you want to find out the hard way, I'm ready." He stood there for a moment, eyes locked with mine, and I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Maybe it was doubt. Maybe it was fear. Maybe he realized I wasn't bluffing anymore. But whatever it was, he didn't say a word. He just turned and walked out the door without another word. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel victory, but I felt something. It wasn't over. It wasn't even close. And now, he was going to know what it felt like to be hunted by the very thing he thought was weak. Type continue for Part 8. Part 8: The Execution. The next few days passed in a strange kind of suspended time, like I was watching a storm build on the horizon but hadn't yet felt the first drop of rain. Danny didn't call, didn't show up, not a single text. It's like he'd gone into hiding, and for the first time in this entire mess, I felt like I had the upper hand. It was quiet, too quiet, almost peaceful. But I knew it wouldn't last. Rosa and Zach were moving quickly behind the scenes. Zach had managed to get into Danny's online accounts, pulled the last bits of digital evidence I needed, and created a secure backup of everything. Zach had even been able to access some of the documents Danny had altered: bank statements, wire transfers, tax info, real gold for building a case. Every mistake Danny made was another step closer to the endgame. The hardest part now was sitting still. I didn't like it, didn't feel comfortable, but Rosa kept reminding me, "You've been patient. You've been waiting. Now let the game play out." The moment finally came a week later, on a cold Friday morning when the phone rang just after breakfast. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the number, Columbia Federal. I took a deep breath and answered, trying to keep my voice even. "Mr. Hargrove," the woman on the other end said, sounding like she was reading from a script. "This is Angela Matthews from Columbia Federal. I'm calling to inform you that we have successfully processed the legal documents for the fraudulent activity you reported." The words hit me like a punch in the chest, but I didn't let it show. "Go on," I said. "We've gathered sufficient evidence of unauthorized access to your account. After further review and with the information provided, we've initiated the legal process to recover the stolen funds. We're also moving forward with pressing charges for fraud and identity theft." My fingers tightened around the phone. I wasn't hearing the words I expected. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about what came next, what Danny would face. "Mr. Hargrove," Angela asked, her voice breaking into my thoughts, "are you still with me?" I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Yes, I'm here. "We will be contacting you with the next steps in the process, including further documentation for you to sign and potential involvement in court proceedings." Court, it was real now. Everything I'd planned, everything I'd hoped for was moving forward. "Thank you," I said, my voice still steady, though I could feel the knot in my stomach tighten. "And thank you for your help." I hung up the phone and sat back in my chair. The weight of the situation came crashing down. It wasn't just about getting back what he took from me. It was about justice, about proving to myself that I hadn't lost everything. I hadn't lost my will. That afternoon, I called Rosa. I told her the news, and for the first time since we started this fight, I heard a genuine smile in her voice. She was happy, but she also knew we still had to finish it. There was no turning back now. And then, right on cue, the phone rang again. This time, the number was unfamiliar, but I recognized the voice on the other end as soon as it spoke. "Dad," Danny's voice came through the line, low and uncertain. "I need to talk to you." I stood up, gripping the phone tight. For a moment, I didn't speak. I didn't know what to say. He didn't know that I knew everything. He didn't know that the walls were closing in on him. He thought he could still control the situation. "What is it, Danny?" I asked, my voice almost too calm. I got a lawyer," he said, his words stumbling over themselves. "I want to work this out. I can pay you back, Dad. Just don't do anything crazy, okay?" I let that sit there in the silence, let the weight of his words hang in the air between us. "Pay me back," I said, voice sharp. "You think paying me back is going to fix this? You think it's that simple?" "I never meant to." "Stop lying," I cut him off. "You thought I was too old, too weak to fight back. You thought I'd just roll over and let you take what's mine. Well, you were wrong." There was a pause, a long stretch of silence where I could almost hear him working through the shock of my response. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. I thought I'd be able to pay it all back before you noticed." "Yeah, well, you were wrong about that too." I could feel the anger rising again, but I kept it under control. I wasn't going to let him see how deep this cut. "The truth is, Danny, this isn't just about the money anymore. It's about trust. And you don't have mine anymore." "I know I messed up. I get it," he said, his voice cracking now. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Yeah, well, it did," I replied, not giving him an inch. "And you're going to pay for it. Not with money, because money can't fix this. You're going to pay for it by facing the consequences." I could hear him gulp. "What does that mean, Dad?" "Just like I told you before," I said, my voice steady now. "You've got until the end of the month to make this right. If you don't, the next step is already in motion." I hung up before he could say anything else. Rosa had said it best. This was the moment when everything changed, when he finally realized that I wasn't bluffing, I wasn't weak, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not now, not ever. I stood there for a long time, staring out the window. My hands were shaking a little, but the anger was gone. What was left was a strange peace, a certainty. Now, it was all about watching the walls close in. The following days felt like I was living in a constant state of waiting, waiting for Danny to make his move, waiting for the law to do its thing, waiting for everything to come crashing down. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a long drop, but knowing you had no choice but to step forward. I tried to keep myself busy, mowing the lawn, cleaning out the garage, anything to keep my mind from running wild with thoughts of what would come next. But as much as I tried to ignore it, the truth was slowly sinking in. Danny was running out of places to hide. The web of lies and deceit he'd spun was unraveling faster than he could try to patch it up. Every day, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The documents Zach had pulled, the phone records Rosa had managed to track, the IP logs, all of it was building a picture of a man who thought he could play the system, thought he could manipulate his father and the trust I had in him. One afternoon, just after lunch, the phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize, but I had a feeling in my gut it was Danny's lawyer. I picked it up without hesitating. "Mr. Hargrove." The voice was smooth, too smooth, like it had been rehearsed in front of a mirror. "This is Lance Morrow. I'm representing my client, Daniel Hargrove. We need to discuss the situation with your accounts." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the tension in my shoulders tighten. "What's there to discuss, Mr. Morrow? Your client stole from me. He betrayed my trust, and now he has to face the consequences." "I understand your position, sir," Morrow said, his voice calm, calculated. "However, we're hoping to avoid further escalation. Danny is prepared to offer restitution, and he's willing to negotiate a repayment plan that can begin immediately." I was quiet for a moment, letting the words hang in the air. Restitution, repayment plan. He wasn't even addressing the real issue. So he thinks he can just pay me back and everything's fine. "Well, Mr. Hargrove." "No, it's not fine," I interrupted. "Your client is a thief, and no amount of money can undo the damage he's done. If Danny wanted to make things right, he should have thought about that before he stole from me." I could hear the lawyer's sigh on the other end of the line. "I'm afraid that's not how the legal process works, sir. We're offering to settle this before it goes to court." Court, I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You think I'm just going to forget what he did and let him walk away because of some settlement? I'm merely suggesting a way to resolve this without it becoming a public matter, Mr. Hargrove. The charges can be dropped, and we can avoid any further damage to your family's reputation. I felt a rush of heat in my chest. Reputation. After everything Danny had done, after everything I'd been through, now they wanted to talk about reputation. My reputation is the least of my worries, I said, my voice steady but firm. What I want is for Danny to take responsibility for his actions. No more lies, no more excuses. If you're so keen on avoiding court, tell him to come and talk to me, face to face. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear papers rustling, the sound of him checking something. Mr. Hargrove, Morrow said after a long moment, I understand your frustration, but let me be clear. If this goes to court, Danny is prepared to defend himself. The evidence he has could potentially shift some of the blame back to you, or at least cast doubt on your claims. I could feel the blood drain from my face, and I leaned forward in my chair, my hands clenched into fists. What are you talking about? Mr. Hargrove, the lawyer continued, his tone turning more businesslike. There's a possibility that Danny could claim that you gave him permission to access the accounts. He could argue that this was all part of an arrangement, that the money transfers were authorized, and that any changes made were at your request. My heart skipped a beat. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. That's a lie. I'm not saying it's the truth, Morrow said quickly. I'm simply outlining the defense strategy, and if this goes to trial, we'll need to discuss the possibility of settlements again. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. Danny was going to fight back, and he wasn't going to do it quietly. He had an angle, one he hadn't even bothered to tell me about. One he was saving for the courtroom, a last-ditch effort to turn the tables. Listen, Mr. Morrow, I said, my voice low, measured. I've heard enough. If Danny wants to lie about me in court, let him. I've got the truth on my side, and that's all that matters. The lawyer's tone shifted, becoming colder. Very well, Mr. Hargrove. We'll proceed as you wish, but I advise you to reconsider the trial. This could get very messy for both of you. I don't care how messy it gets, I snapped. I'm done playing games. You tell your client I'm ready to meet him in court. With that, I hung up the phone, my breath coming faster now, heart pounding. It was official. Danny was going to fight this. And he was going to lie, manipulate, and try to twist everything around to make it seem like I was the one who was in the wrong. But it didn't matter. Because at that moment I realized something crucial. The game was over. Danny thought he could turn this around, thought he could play the system and use my trust against me. But I wasn't going to let him. He decrossed a line, and now the only thing left to do was watch him unravel. That night I called Rosa. I told her about the lawyer's call, about the new threats Danny was making. She didn't say much, but I could hear the understanding in her voice. You're right, Mr. Hargrove, she said. The truth always comes out, and when it does, it'll be his turn to face the consequences. I hung up, sitting in my chair, staring out at the empty yard. It was cold, dark, but somehow it felt like the calm before the storm. Because I knew now, for sure, Danny wasn't going to get away with this. Not after everything I'd been through. Not after everything I was about to do to make sure the truth came out. The days after the phone call with Danny's lawyer were the longest I'd ever spent. Everything seemed to move in slow motion, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something big to happen. The truth had already started to set the stage for the next chapter, but I didn't know how it would all unfold. My gut told me this wasn't going to be easy. If it was going to end in court, it was going to be a fight. A messy, public one. But that's what I wanted. Not for the drama, not for the spectacle. I wanted the truth to be out there for everyone to see. For Danny to face what he'd done, not just to me, but to himself. Rosa and Zach kept working behind the scenes, gathering evidence, preparing the final pieces of the puzzle. Zach had uncovered a few things I hadn't even expected: more shady transfers, questionable emails, and transactions from accounts I didn't even know existed. There were enough breadcrumbs to bury Danny in the truth. Every lie he'd told, every sneaky move he'd made, was coming back to him. Then, about 2 weeks before the trial, I got a call from Columbia Federal. This time, it wasn't the lawyer. It was Mr. Price, the fraud investigator. "Mr. Hargrove," he said, "I'm calling to update you on the progress of your case." I sat up straighter in my chair, my heart pounding. This was it. "Go ahead," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We've completed our internal review and are now working with law enforcement to pursue charges. We have gathered sufficient evidence, including the documentation you provided and additional evidence uncovered by your legal team. We've also been in contact with the local authorities, and they're preparing to move forward with an arrest." The words hung in the air, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Arrest. I'd known this was coming. I'd known Danny would eventually be caught, but hearing those words in the quiet of my own home, felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. "I'll be in touch soon with the next steps," Mr. Price continued. "But I just wanted to let you know that we're moving forward with full force. And sir, I have to say, your persistence has made all the difference in this case." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Thank you," I said, but I didn't feel grateful. I felt cold, numb. The only thing I could focus on was the inevitable moment when Danny would have to face the consequences of his actions. Later that afternoon, Rosa came over to my house. She had a look in her eyes, a mix of pride and relief, and she sat across from me, folding her hands on the kitchen table. "We're almost there," she said. "I've been talking to the prosecutor's office and they're ready to take this to trial. The evidence is airtight. Danny's got nowhere to run." I nodded, feeling the weight of it all. This wasn't a victory yet. This wasn't the end, but it was close. "You think he'll turn himself in?" I asked. She shook her head. "Danny's too proud. He'll fight it, but that's just more of the same game he's been playing. It's going to backfire." I couldn't help but agree. He thought he could outsmart me, outsmart everyone, but in the end, the truth always wins. Always. The trial date was set for early May. It was only a few weeks away. In the meantime, I did what I'd been doing for the last few months, keeping my head down, staying focused, and preparing for what was next. I wasn't worried anymore. Not in the way I used to be. I'd come this far and there was no turning back now. The week before the trial, I got one final call from Danny. "Dad," he said, voice strained, almost desperate. "Can we talk?" I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the late afternoon sky. I knew what was coming. Talk about what? I know this is all my fault. I know I messed up. But please don't let it go to court. We can fix this, Dad. I'll pay you back. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." I could hear the tremor in his voice, but there was something else too. A hint of fear. Fear that his world was about to collapse around him. "Danny," I said, my voice steady, but with an edge to it he wasn't used to hearing. "You can't fix this by throwing money at it. You can't buy your way out of this. You took something that wasn't yours and you've made your bed. Now you're going to lie in it." "I didn't mean for it to go this far, Dad," he pleaded. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just trying to keep up. You don't understand how hard things have been." "You're right," I said, voice sharp. "I don't understand, and I don't care to, because what you did wasn't about being desperate, Danny. It was about taking advantage of someone who trusted you." He fell silent, and I could almost feel the weight of his shame hanging in the air. For a moment, I thought he might say something more, apologize, beg me to reconsider, but he didn't. "Goodbye, Danny," I said quietly. "I hope you figure out what kind of man you want to be, but I won't be here when you do." And then I hung up. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious, but I did feel something close to closure. The man I had raised, the son I had hoped would carry on my legacy, had chosen his path, and now it was up to him to walk it. The trial came, and it was everything I had expected. Danny tried to play the victim, claiming he was under pressure, that I had given him permission, that the transfers were all part of a misunderstanding. But the evidence was too strong. The digital trails, the bank statements, the testimonies, it all painted a clear picture of his guilt. The jury didn't hesitate. When the verdict came back guilty, I wasn't there to see it. I wasn't in the courtroom, but Rosa kept me updated. And when the judge handed down the sentence, I felt a strange kind of peace. Danny would have to face the consequences of his actions, not just with the law, but with his conscience. And that, I thought, was the hardest lesson of all. For me, this was the end of the betrayal, the end of the silence, the end of my trust in the son I had raised. But I could live with it, because I had reclaimed my dignity, and in the end, that was all that mattered.